Hilchos Ishus Perek Achad Asar, the laws of marriage, chapter 11. Yesterday we began for the first time to learn about the ksuba, the marriage contract that is written by any man who wishes to marry a woman. It's one of the components of having the marriage come full circle from kiddushin to nisuin, even though the contract itself isn't what makes the marriage, but it's necessary as a prerequisite to the marriage. And the basic outline of the ksuba, as we learned yesterday, was that if a woman is a virgin, the husband has to promise to pay her 200 dinar, 200 silver coins in case of divorce. He can add whatever he wants, but 200 is the minimum. And in a case where the woman is not a virgin, then the minimum required commitment is 100 silver coins. And I showed you yesterday examples in the kesuba themselves. This is one kesuba from a virgin woman where you see the word kesev zuzeh, matan, 200 silver coins, along with the words v'hosif la min dilei, where the groom commits to adding whatever he wishes to add. And here's another ksuba of a non-virgin woman where the words are zuzei mea, just 100 zuz, as you can see here. And also on the bottom you have v'hosif la min dilei, where the groom adds to the ksuba on his own accord. But the bottom line is that the fundamental, what's called the ikar, the mainstay of the ksuba, is either a 200 silver coin or a 100 silver coin commitment. The Rambam today will begin by telling us some unusual cases. Yesterday it was pretty binary. A virgin woman 200, non-virgin woman 100. Today the Rambam begins by describing a bunch of cases where although a woman is a virgin, she'll only get 100 coins in the ksuba, and other cases where although it seems like a woman can be a non-virgin, but she will still get the money of, as though she were a full virgin, 200 silver coins. And so, let's begin. Halacha Aleph. Hanoisei besula shanis almana oy shanis garsha oy nachletza. If a man marries a woman who technically, physically is a virgin, but she has been in a previous marriage from which she was widowed or divorced or got chalitza, which means her husband had died childless, and she was forced to get chalitza, the whole shoe taking off, shoe removal process, which we're going to learn about later on in this book, from the dead husband's brother. So, it's a case where she was technically in a marriage, but the marriage ended before her physical virginity was taken away. If the previous marriage dissolved, only within the state of erusin, in other words, she was just consecrated. The husband had only done the formal act of acquisition, never actually consummated the marriage through chuppah, as we saw yesterday. And at that point, either he died and widowed her, or he divorced her, or he died childless and the brother did chalitza, ksubasam masayim. So here, even though she was in a previous marriage, but because it only got to the stage of consecration, she retains her status of a besula, and she gets 200 coins next time around, promised in the ksuba. But if the original marriage had dissolved after entering the stage of nisuin, which means the previous husband had already taken her into a secluded room, so at that point, ksuba sameya, her new ksuba in the second marriage transfers to only being of value at 100 coins. Shemisha nises, harehi kibu'ula, because as we saw yesterday, the rule is, once a man does the formal act that makes up nisuin, he takes the woman into a secluded room, even if no actual relations take place, at that point she is considered to no longer be a virgin, and any future marriage she enters into will only have to pay 100 coins for the ksuba. V'chein, a similar case, hanoisei besula, mishuchreres oy giyores oy shvuya, if somebody marries a woman who has been freed from slavery or converted from out of Judaism, or she was held in captivity, technically, physically, she's in the state of a virgin, but nevertheless, im nishtachrara hashivcha, v'nisgaira hakusis, v'nifdas hashvuya, v'im pchuses mibas shaleshanim v'yem echad, if at the time that she was freed, or the time that she converted, or the time that she was released from captivity, she was under 3 years old, ksubasan masayim, then the ksuba being promised to her by the new husband has to be the regular full 200 coins. But if the transfer from non-Jewish to Jew, or from slave to freedom, or from captivity to being released took place after they were 3 years old, ksubasan meya, then the ksuba in the new marriage is only 100 coins, because the Talmud explains that once a woman has been in captivity or in a state of being a non-Jew, the assumption is that they are no longer a virgin. And therefore, the money being promised only has to be 100 coins. How come when they were released less than 3 years old, do we still say they retain the ksuba of 200? Talmud explains because before 3, any act of relations won't have a physical effect on the hymen, and therefore the woman can still remain a virgin later on and get the full 200 coins for her ksuba. Says the Rambam, it emerges then from this last halacha that there are cases where a woman is physically a basula and yet will only walk away with 100 coins. Why is that? Why did the sages enact for these women that their ksuba is only 100 coins, and even though they're physically virgins, since the presumption is that a woman who has entered into a state of marriage will ultimately have relations, and it is the presumption of a woman who is enslaved, or a non-Jew, or a woman in captivity, and they will also be forced to engage in relations. So any woman who enters that category, whether indeed this specific woman had relations or not, we treat them as if they did. They are like a woman who has had relations, like for any matter, including the matter of the ksuba being promised only 100 coins. Halacha Gimel. Mukas eitz ksuba sameya. A woman who never engaged in relations, but she was struck by wood. Struck by wood is the Talmudic generic term for losing virginity through any other way outside of relations. A typical example was a woman was struck by a piece of wood and it caused her to bleed, etc. So even though, again, she never engaged in relations, the ksuba that she will get when she gets married is only 100 coins, treated as though she's a non-virgin. Afilu nises al menashi besula shleima, and here the mukas eitz veers off a little bit. Even if she got married on the assumption that she was actually a complete virgin, v'nimtzas mukas eitz, and it turns out that she was indeed struck by wood, ksuba sameya, her ksuba remains at 100. Later on in this chapter, we're going to develop a number of cases where a husband is allowed to claim that because he was unaware of the woman's physical status at the time of the marriage, the entire marriage can be annulled retroactively. Here, even if a husband discovers later in the marriage that she was a mukas eitz, she was struck by wood, which could be grounds for the husband to claim, hey, you know what, I didn't know what I was getting into. I want to annul the marriage entirely. Says the Rambam, no. Even if it's revealed later that she was a mukas eitz, yes, she will not get the full 200 coins like a regular basula would, but the ksuba goes down, they remain married, and he only has to give her 100 coins in case of divorce. A young child under 3 years old who had relations, afilu ba'aleh adam god even by an adult, ksubasa masayim, her ksuba remains 200 coins, soifa shetachzer besula kshara b'sulais. The halachic physiological ruling on this is that a woman under 3 years old her virginity will return like any other virgin. On the flip side, if an adult woman had relations with a child, a male child who was under 9 years old, ksubasa masayim, if she then enters into another marriage, her ksuba will be a full 200 coins, as if she never experienced relations. Because in halacha, only relations committed by a male child above 9 years old is considered to be of halachic consequence. Less than that, it's considered nothing. Halacha dalid besula shehi b'gerasei sumay aylinis. If a woman is a virgin but she's already a major. Today this is pretty typical. Women don't get married right after they begin puberty. Most betulot that enter into a marriage are a bogeret. But in those days, we've seen many times that it was typical for a father to marry off his child even in a state of a katana, under 12, and certainly in a state of na'arut, the 6 months between first showing physical signs of puberty and becoming a major. But if a woman is a bogeret, she's after the age of majority, and she is still a virgin, or she's blind, or she's barren, she shows all the physical signs of not being able to bear children, ksubasan masayim. Since at the end of the day, they are a virgin, the ksuba that they get when they enter their marriage is of 200 coins. But when it comes to a deaf mute woman and a mentally unstable woman, the sages enacted that when they get married, they don't get a ksuba at all. Why? A mentally unstable woman, we've seen already before. The sages never enacted the possibility of marriage for them at all. They were too worried that a mentally unstable person in a marriage would be completely damaging to it. So they said that anytime they get married, it isn't even considered a full marriage. And a deaf mute woman, even though rabbinically they could get married, they didn't enact the obligation of a ksuba. Why? So people shouldn't hold back from marrying them. A ksuba is a liability in the end of the day. It was enacted yesterday, as we saw, for women's rights, to stop husbands from divorcing at whim. But for a deaf mute, the sages said, the opposite is true. If a man goes into a marriage knowing he's going to have to potentially pay out a ksuba to such a woman, he'll avoid marrying her to begin with. We want to allow deaf-mute women to enter into marriages, so we're going to say, whoever will take a deaf-mute woman in marriage won't have to pay a ksuba at all. The same way there's no obligation to pay out the ksuba to a deaf-mute woman, there's also no obligation for a husband to provide her with support, with food support. Neither any other of the conditions that usually come along with the ksuba. We're going to see starting tomorrow that a ksuba is actually a two-way street. There's obligations that a husband is obligated to provide for his wife, and there's obligations that the wife is obligated to provide for her husband. When it comes to a deaf-mute woman, the whole ksuba, along with all of its accessories, are not applicable. But what if a man marries a deaf-mute woman and then she becomes healed? Yesh la ksuba or tanai ksuba. At the moment that she becomes normalized, the obligation of ksuba re-arises. He needs to write her a ksuba and all the other conditions that come along with that. Uksuba sameya. However, since at this point she's already married and therefore goes into the category of a non-virgin woman, the ksuba which she is given is only of 100 coins. Halacha hey nasa chereshes oishaita v'kasav lahen meya mana. What if a person chose on his own volition to marry a deaf-mute woman or to marry a mentally unstable woman, and even though there's no obligation from the sages to write a ksuba, he decided to write a document which has 100 mana, which is like, mana is 100 coins, so 100 is 10,000 silver coins. Ksubasan kayemes. Because he chose to do it, the ksuba is valid. As the Talmud says, this is a person who just simply wished to damage his own money. You took responsibility on yourself. Your fault. We're not going to stop you from choosing to do that. Till now we're talking about a regular competent man marrying challenged women. What if it's the opposite? A deaf-mute man or a mentally unstable man wants to take for himself a competent, normal woman. Even if later on during the marriage, the deaf-mute or the mentally unstable become healed, the wives no longer have a claim on their husbands at all. Since when they entered the marriage, there was no obligation of the ksuba. Later on, they cannot come to claim it. In other words, as opposed to the other case where it was the man who was normal and married the woman, when she heals, he has to give her a ksuba. Here, they have no claim. However, if they do wish to keep married after they healed, yesh lahen ksuba samea, they do have to write a ksuba, and the ksuba is 100 coins. So I kind of misspoke just to clarify what I said. At the moment that they become healed, the wives cannot retroactively claim any amount of the ksuba. But if the marriage wants to continue, they certainly do have to provide a ksuba, again, because they're already married, only of 100 coins. If the way that this deaf-mute person got married to the competent woman was not by his own accord, but through the court's intervention, and sometimes they do that, the court will come in and marry off a deaf-mute man to a regular woman, and in that case, they will take the responsibility of writing the ksuba. And they will write it, creating a lien on the properties of the deaf-mute person. Since it was the court who wrote the ksuba, at this point, even if he heals, she's allowed to take whatever it is that's rightfully hers. But a mentally unstable man, this could never happen, because a court would never marry off a mentally unstable man. The sages indeed never made a marriage possible for a mentally unstable person because they were worried there's going to be too much friction. And so the case would never come about. Because the whole idea behind the enactment of the sages would never last. In other words, ksuba, no ksuba, mental instability in the marriage is going to lead to destroying that marriage. Therefore, the sages saw fit to begin with never to enact the possibility of marriage between a mentally unstable person and another. By the way, I mentioned that the first time we came across the mental instability concept, that in Shulchan Aruch it says that it's very hard to define what exactly is mentally unstable. And so to apply this ruling broadly is quite impossible. Understand that every single individual case has to be examined on an individual level. The sages also never enacted the possibility for a child to get married under bar mitzvah. Since in the end, when he grows up, he'll be able to get married properly. There's no reason for us to step in and allow him to get married earlier. Wait till it's your time and then get married. If that's the case, why did the sages allow an underage girl to get married? If the same logic seemingly applies, when she grows up, she'll become a major, she can get married, so wait till her time. How come when it comes to a boy, we don't let the boy get married underage, but the girl we do? Says the Rambam, the sages wanted to protect women. They were worried that if the underage girl were left in a state where she could never get married, sometimes in certain cases people will take advantage of that and treat her as though she were ownerless. And therefore, to protect the women, they allowed the possibility of underage marriage. As the Rambam said the other day, we still don't do that. A father should never, if at all possible, a father should avoid marrying off his daughter underage. But technically, halachically, the mechanism exists for her protection. We could never marry off a boy, even if he reaches the age of bar mitzvah, until we check him and ascertain physically that he has reached puberty. If a boy does transgress that prohibition, and after age 9 marries a woman, ein la ksuba. She has no ksuba because she isn't following the halachic rites of marriage, so we're not going to allow her to have that right of the ksuba either. But if the boy who married this woman grows up, in other words, he reaches majority, and now he wants to keep married to her, yesh la ikar ksuba. At this point, she has the right to collect the mainstay of the ksuba, 200 or 100 in whatever case it was when she originally got married. What if a convert converted with his wife? 2 non-Jews married, and they both converted. Ksuba samana, at this point when they marry anew as Jews, there is a ksuba. The ksuba is for 100. Shal manas kein kima, because we say that that's the reason that the convert kept his wife. He kept his wife with the understanding that he's now going to be obligated on all Jewish levels, including the level of the ksuba, at least for 100 coins, because she's at this point no longer a virgin. And now we transition, knowing all the different types of women who get different types of ksubas. Now we transition to the topic that we introduced also yesterday, the end of the chapter, but now we're going to explore it at length. And this is called ta'anat betulim. Ta'anat betulim is the concept that a man can make a claim that although he married on the understanding that his wife is a virgin, he discovered her not to be a virgin. The Rambam will tell us later in this chapter that there's a specific time frame that a man can claim that. If the man takes the wife into seclusion, he only has the immediate period after that, which is typically explained as a day. He has a day after they go first into seclusion to make this claim. If they didn't go into seclusion till later, he has 30 days from the marriage. So it's not a free-for-all license, could come up years later and say, my wife's not a virgin. You have maximum of a month. But the point is, there are times when a man can say, there was an understanding when I entered the marriage and it didn't pan out. And so the Rambam is going to explore many different cases and possibilities where we will see what will happen to the original ksuba. Because again, they went on the understanding that she's a virgin, which means that the man promised 200 coins, and now he's discovering lack of virginity. Many times the man will want to actually annul the marriage entirely, not just bring it down to 100. He wants to go completely out. And the woman will want to stay in the marriage, and sometimes she will actually end up retaining her original 200, and other times will bring it down to 100, as we will see. Says the Rambam Halacha Ches, Kol Besula Sheksubasa Masayim. Any virgin who enters a marriage with a $200 ksuba promised to her, Yesh La Tainas Besulim. She is able to have a claim of virginity made against her. V'chol Sheksubasa Meya. Any woman who enters a marriage with a ksuba of only 100, or a case where there is no ksuba at all, Ein La Tainas Besulim. Then of course, no claim can be made against her about her virginity, because the whole idea of coming in with a $100 ksuba or less is that you're not a halachic virgin. If a man goes into seclusion with his betrothed wife before they actually do nisuin, before they actually bring in the full level of marriage, ein latanas besulim, also no claim of virginity can be made against her, as the commentaries explain, because we're worried that if he went into seclusion today, maybe he did something else during the time of engagement, and after the marriage, you can no longer claim that you expected her to be a virgin. Halacha tesu mahi tainas besulim. What exactly is the claim that a husband will make about his wife's virginity? It's a case where a man marries a woman with the presumption that she is a virgin, and later he comes to court and he claims and says, I did not find my wife to be a virgin. There are 2 telltale signs that a husband would be looking for and saying, in this case of a claim that he didn't find. The one sign of a virgin woman is that there is blood dripping out at the end of the first relations. The hasheni, and the second sign would be a pressure or a tightness that a husband will find at the time of first relations during conjugal relations. And so we're going to see that typically when the husband makes a claim of virginity, he's making the first claim. I didn't see blood. Usually the second claim is of a lesser stature, and we'll discuss it later. Halacha Yud Hanoiseas HaBesula Sheksubasa Masayim. So let's take a look here at this picture, and we can see the conversation as it develops. A man marries a virgin and therefore promises her a 200 coin ksuba. The next day he comes to court, V'toan v'amar, he claims and he says, Lo mitzasiya besula, I did not find my wife to be a virgin. So we can't just take his word for it. We have to ask the woman what she says. Im amra emeshu lo mitza'ani besula, mipnei shenafalti v'hikani eitz oikarka v'holchu besula. What if she responds the following? It's true what he's saying. I'm not a virgin, but not because I engaged in relations with somebody else, but simply because I had fallen in my childhood and I was struck by a piece of wood or by the ground and the virginity was lost. So in this case, she's not contradicting the husband's words. She's agreeing to the husband's words, simply explaining them away. In this case, she is believed. And her ksuba, she stays in the marriage. Again, the husband's proposition is, I didn't find you to be a virgin, I think you were sleeping around. And therefore I want the marriage to go completely off. The woman is saying, no, I can explain it. And I want my ksuba indeed not to be 200, but to be 100. We believe her. Even if the husband presses on and says, maybe it was a man who had relations with you and therefore you deserve nothing, what the Talmud calls mekachtos, a mistaken transaction. I entered into this marriage with a false understanding. We do not listen to his claim. Why don't we listen to his claim? The Talmud here employs the famous rule, bari v'shema, bari adif. A claim made with certainty versus a claim made with probability. The claim made with certainty is always believed. The woman is saying a claim of certainty. I agree, I'm not a virgin, here's why. The husband is only saying, maybe. How do I know to trust you? Maybe you were sleeping around. Since he's only a maybe and she's a for sure, we believe her, and he has to stay in the marriage, and if he wants a divorce, he has to give a ksuba of 100 coins. However, this is, I think, the first time we're coming across this in the entire Rambam, and it comes up many, many times later. Before the man pays out the 100 coins that he has to, he is able to declare a cherem. Cherem is an excommunication. We discussed the concept of cherem way back in the first book of the Rambam. And this is a cherem that's made in the context of court. Many times if a person believes that a falsified claim is being made against him, even if legally he has to pay out the claim, he's allowed to declare that anybody who's trying to get money out of me in a false way should be put under a ban of excommunication. That was treated very severely in those days, and people were scared of it. It would cause people to back out if they were actually making a false claim. So before the husband pays out this 100 coins, he is allowed to declare a default excommunication, shalei ba'aleh ish, on the presumption that no man has ever had relations with her, she'ena davar vadaleh, because again, he's not certain about it, so we can't believe him fully, but he has the authority to declare that cherem. That's the first conversation. You see it on the screen. The husband is accusing the wife. She's actually agreeing, justifying it, and he's saying, how do I know? Maybe there's another possibility. So therefore, what we do is the gavel here rules that we go off from 200 and we rule with 100. Next conversation. Amrahi, the man is again accusing her of not being a virgin. She responds, Emes Amar Shalei Mitza'ani Besula. It's true, I was not a virgin, but here she has a different justification. The Ish Ba'alai Ba'oines Achar Shenisarasti Lai. I actually did have relations with somebody by force. I was raped after this man consecrated me. So, the ksuba was promised, follow what's happening here. The ksuba was promised at the moment of consecration. At that moment, she indeed was a virgin. And so the $200 promise was actually made in full faith. What the woman is saying is that later on, after the man already made this commitment, she was raped, and therefore she still wants her ksuba to remain at 200. And the Rambam indeed says, the woman is believed again. And here it remains at 200. What if the husband responds with a possible counterclaim? Okay, you say you were raped. Who says I should believe you on the timeline? Maybe you were raped before I even consecrated you. And my whole transaction is a mistaken transaction. Or maybe, it was after consecration, but it wasn't a rape. It was a consensual relationship. So the Rambam again here rules that since his claim is only being made in probability, we don't listen to him with legal ramifications, but we do give him the right to declare that excommunication. We give him the right to declare a ban of excommunication on whoever it is that's declaring false claims just to get money out of me that I'm not obligated to pay. But again, as you see on the screen, the final ruling remains in the woman's favor. The husband is accusing her. If she agrees in the sense that she says it's true, but justifies it, even if the husband says, how do I know, maybe other possibilities, since he's only saying a maybe, so the woman is believed. Halacha Yud Beis, there's another way that it can play out. In this case, the woman is actually contradicting the man. She's not going to agree, she's going to contradict him. The man says, I didn't find her to be a virgin. She says, never happened. He never even had relations with me. I still am a virgin. So either we have two choices. The court can check her body to ascertain if the virginity is still in place, or another possibility is we can tell the man and the woman, go into a room and have relations as witnesses watch, and then we'll ascertain that the virginity is either there or not. The commentaries explain, of course, we don't mean to conduct the act in front of witnesses, that's forbidden. But the point is that the sheet that was used should be inspected to see whether there's blood on it or not. So that's this case over here. Husband is accusing her, she's saying, you never had relations with me, so the halacha is, you either check her out or you use witnesses. Another case, Amra, she says, again, a contradiction. The husband says, I didn't find her to be a virgin. She says, absolutely not true. Ba'alai, he had relations with me. He found me to be a virgin like everybody else, and he's actually lying. So here, there's other possibilities for why the husband could be saying what he's saying. And the court takes that into account. We ask the husband and we say, what exactly was missing that you think your wife's not a virgin? What was the matter that caused you to say that your wife's not a virgin? If he says, remember there's two signs of a virgin, the blood and the tightness. So if he says it's the first claim, I didn't find blood, but it can be mishpachta. So we check her genealogy. Maybe it's a genetic issue. Shema ein lahem dam klal. Maybe the women in her family have no blood. Leidam nidav, leidam besulim, they don't have menstrual blood, no virginity blood. Im nimtzu kulan ken arezu bechaskasa. If indeed we find out it's a genetic issue, then both can be true. The husband can think there was no virginity, but actually there was, because that's the way the family works. But if the rest of the women in her family are not found to have this condition, they're all regularly bleeding. So now what do? We check this woman further. On her own, maybe she has some issues. Maybe there was a great condition that dried out the moisture in her limbs. Or she used to fast, and fasting can cause loss of blood. We put her through a little regimen. We juice her up. We give her food. We give her drink till she becomes healthy, and go through relations again. Let's see if there'll be blood or not. If there's nothing of the above, no sickness, no hunger, no reason why she should be different, this would be a case of a valid claim of virginity. Even if the second sign was there was pressure, since there's no blood and there's no reason to explain that away, we assume there was no virginity, something's wrong, she probably had relations with somebody else before. Because halachically, every virgin has blood, young, old, beginning of puberty, a full major. The only reason that could stop blood would only be for sickness, as we explained. And since there is no sickness, we have to believe the man. But that's all if the man, when he was asked, had said that what was lacking was the first sign. But what if the husband says, you know what got me to make this claim? I didn't find any pressure, I found an open door. So here, there's more reasonable reasons to explain that away. We figure out how old is the woman. How old is your wife? Perhaps she's a begeres, perhaps she's a major. Once women reach majority, most bogrot, most major women do not have any pressure which can be easily felt. She has aged, her limbs have become more disconnected, more weak, and the hymen may have gone away. But if she wasn't that age yet, we ask the man again. Shema hitesa, ba'alta benachas, maybe you tilted, maybe you had relations slowly, or lefichach lehir gashta b'dechik, therefore you didn't feel the pressure. Im amar loiki, if the man keeps persisting, says, no, elavadai pesach basuach chaya, I know for sure it was an open door, harezu tanas basulim l'chol basula shalei bagra, that would be a valid claim of virginity against any virgin who was not at the age of majority, being tana, being naira, being bria, being chila, whether she's younger, older, healthier, or sick. Shekol naira basula, pischa sasamu, because a woman who is under the age of majority, at the age of na'arut, will always have a closed door. Even if there was blood, if the door was open, there is no halachic virginity, and we have to believe the man. That's what the last case over here is. When the husband is saying, you're not a virgin, she's saying, I am, and we're asking the man all the questions. Bottom line is, we have to either check her out or figure out what was wrong, and at the end of the day, it may end up being that it's a true claim. Says the Rambam Halacha Yud Gimel, Yesh Go'ainim Shahiru. There are some Go'ainim who have ruled, unlike what the Rambam says, Sha'abaygeres ein la tainas damim v'yesh la tainas pesach pasuach. That a woman, once she reaches the age of majority, is not able to have a claim of blood made against her, but is able to have a claim of open door made against her. Again, the Rambam said it's the opposite. For a woman who reaches majority, you can no longer claim the open door case. You can only claim a lack of blood. These Go'anim say the complete opposite. Once a woman reaches majority, you can still claim open door, you cannot claim an issue of blood. The Ein Derech HaGemara Mara Davar Zeh says the Rambam, the simple way of the Talmud's understanding, doesn't show this to be true. There must have been a mistake in the copies of the Talmud that these Gaonim had. A very unusual expression in the Rambam. I've already checked. I've consulted with a number of manuscripts, early manuscripts in the Talmud. As a matter of fact, in the 13th book of the Rambam writes that he was in possession of manuscripts that were 500 years old at his time. He lived in the 1100s. These manuscripts were 500 years before that, which is about 200 years after the Talmud was written. So he had super old manuscripts, and the Rambam says in all the manuscripts that I consulted, I found the matter to be as we explained. The only claim that can be made against the bogeres, a major, is a claim of lack of blood, not the claim of an open door. The Rambam reminds us, it was the sages who initially enacted the idea that a man has to commit to paying a ksuba to a woman. And therefore, it was them too who made the enactment, they made a safeguard for the man, that if a man makes a claim against virginity and the woman is contradicting him, he is believed, she has to bring the proof, not the man. Again, in the first cases, remember, where the woman wasn't contradicting him, she was simply justifying the claim, there we believe the woman. But where she contradicts, we believe the man. The Rambam says there's a presumption. No sane person would spend so much effort on a feast and then destroy it and turn his joy into mourning. If the husband is coming and making this claim, it's probably because he's saying the truth. Halacha Tezvav, the Rambam now says what I told you before. Until when can the man make the claim of virginity? If they went into seclusion, right away. And right away means about a day's time. That's why we learned yesterday that a virgin should get married on Wednesday. So the next day when the court is in session, the man can come and make his claim. But if they were not in privacy, and then he can make the claim even after 30 days. So I misspoke before. I said it's only up to 30 days. Sorry, the Rambam says even after 30 days. And he does not say when the maximum time frame is. Halacha Tezayin, Hoiru Kala Go'inim. All the Go'inim agreed unanimously. That any case where we believe the man, when the woman contradicts him, it's only to the point of lahafsida ikar aksuba. It's only concerning making the woman lose the rights to the mainstay, the 200 or the 100 promised in the ksuba. But any additions, the woman still gets. I'm going to show you in the beginning of the class. We see in every ksuba, even today, the husband writes the main obligation plus v'hosifla min delay. He adds some money on his own account. That addition is being made on the husband's own volition. He's marrying the woman. He wants to add money on his own accord. So when an issue of virginity will come up and cause the ksuba to go down, it will only cause the mainstay of the ksuba to go down. But the addition still belongs to the woman. Unless there's clear proof that emerges that she was indeed a non-virgin, or she agrees to having misled him that she was indeed a non-virgin and before they were consecrated, then he takes away the entire ksuba. The whole thing is annulled. Therefore, the Rambam says, because in the case of doubt, we're only going to make her lose the initial 200, but not any additions, the husband, who's under the impression that his wife is fooling him, can ask for an oath. And this is the first time also we're having this concept in the Rambam. Many times when a person is worried that somebody else is extracting money on a false premise, before the other person takes the money, the initial man can have that person swear to the truth of his words. B'nikitas chayfetz. This is a higher level biblical oath where you actually hold a holy object while you say the oath. And that, again, was a deterrent for people who were lying. They wouldn't want to make an oath, take God's name in vain, and they may admit to their wrongdoing. So the man in this case, who's worried that his wife is misleading him, can force his wife to take an oath while holding a holy object, like all those who have to take an oath and then can take their money, and only then will she be able to collect the additional money belonging to her in the ksuba. But when it comes to the other way around, the initial $200, we don't say that the woman should allow to make the man swear before he causes her to lose that money. Again, the presumption is a man would not make a meal and then destroy it. So because he's coming with the claim, he's destroying his own meal, he won't have to verify his own claim with an oath. But in this case, because she believes that she is being misled, she thinks she is a virgin and deserves the original $200, so before she allows that money to go away, she can declare she can declare a ban of excommunication on anybody who is making a false claim against her. Let's say there's a case, one of these cases above, where the husband and wife got into a fight about their virginity, and the bottom line is that the woman loses the $200. Let's say the husband still wants to keep her. Says, you know what, you misled me, whatever it is, let's stay married. He needs to rewrite a ksuba. The first ksuba, which had $200, was a mistaken ksuba. It's null and void. He has to write her a new ksuba, and this time for only 100, because now he's going in with the knowledge, at least in his own mind, that she's not a virgin, and only promises her 100, but there has to be a ksuba. Because it's forbidden for a man to be with his wife, even for a moment, without a ksuba, as we've explained a number of times, and therefore if he wants to stay married, he must rewrite that ksuba, again, only for $100.